Good day everyone, I am Kimilat and now I'll be reporting to you The Psychology of the Individual by Gordon Allport. So basically, this is just a continuation to the report of Miss Shekinah Pearl Niyog. So just a quick review on what has been discussed in part 1. So Miss Niyog gave us idea about dispositional theories up until the structure of personality. And for the part 2 that will be discussed by me, I will be going to tackle about the motivation up to the concept of humanity. So before we start, let me share this nice quotation from Gordon Allport. So he once quoted that reason adapts impulses and beliefs to the real world. Rationalization, on the other hand, adapts the concept of reality to the impulses and beliefs of the individual. The reasoning discovers the true cause of our actions, while rationalization finds good reason to justify our actions. So in here, Allport differentiated reason and rationalization. So it is a phrase about the role of our beliefs at the moment of thinking about our own actions. So as what Allport believes in his theory that we are conscious of all of our actions and choices in the present and that it plays a vital role in shaping our behaviors. So the first topic is motivation with its two underlying concepts, which is the theory of motivation and the functional autonomy. So when we say motivation, it occurs independent of past experiences. It means that it is the present motives such as interests, attitudes, and lifestyle that govern a person's behavior. So when we say motivation, it is not rooted from our past experiences, especially in childhood, where we were able to experience toilet training and the punishment and reinforcement that we received from our parents when we are young, because according to Allport, people are motivated by present drives, which includes our interest at the moment, our lifestyle, our hobbies, and the likes, and that we are aware on what we are doing and why we are doing it. So in short, our motivations is not related to our past experiences, but rather our motivation comes from our awareness at the present. So we have here 4 characteristics of motivation, and later we will discuss it further. In motivation, there are 2 motives that Allport emphasized, and these are the peripheral and appropriate motives. So when we say peripheral motives, these are motives that reduce a need. So based on some examples of peripheral motives are eating when one feels hungry. So when we are hungry, we do have the need for food. So we eat. And after eating, we don't anymore feel hungry. So with that, we reduced our need for food. So di ba pag mabusog ta, wala na kayo taingon nga nanginahanglan og pagkaon. So from that moment na nabusog ta and wala na ta nanginahanglan og pagkaon, but pasabot na reduce nato ang atoang need sa pagkaon. And that is an example of peripheral motives. But when we say appropriate motives or appropriate striving, these are motives that seek to maintain tension and disequilibrium. An example of this is during adolescence, we may yearn to be a great artist or novelist. So, in short, appropriate strivings is directly opposite to peripheral motives in a way that appropriate strivings does not reduce a need or it doesn't reduce attention, but it maintains the tension. In a way that a person sets goals, the person makes plans of the future, and he is leading or he or she is leading towards progress or development. So in short, appropriate strivings is characterized by the pursuit of major life goals. So according to Allport, a useful theory of personality rests on the assumption that people not only react to their environment but also shape their environment and cause it to react to them. So an adult behavior, according to Allport, is both reactive and proactive. Now, what are these reactive and proactive behaviors? So when we say reactive behavior, it doesn't allow for possibilities of growth. And that is why it is called homeostatic. So it sees people as being motivated primarily by needs to reduce tension and to return to the state of equilibrium. So psychoanalysis and various learning theories like behaviorism and social learning theory are examples of it. So reactive behavior can somewhat be related or associated to the peripheral motives that we discussed earlier. So reactive behavior is simply motivated by the need to reduce tension And example for that is eating when one feels hungry. So in short, reactive behavior only reacts to the environment at that certain moment. On the other hand, when we say proactive behavior, so it views people as consciously acting on their environment that leads toward psychological health. So proactive people purposely act on their environment because they seek additional tension, and this can be related to the proactive, or appropriate strivings or motives that we also discussed earlier, in which these people sets and seeks for new goals and that they make room for progress and improvement. When we say functional autonomy, it represents a theory of changing rather than unchanging motives. So some of human motives are functionally independent or functionally autonomous from the original motive responsible for human behavior. So motives may have started as tension reduction in childhood, but adults achieve independence from these motives and find pleasure and intrinsic motivation in the behaviors. So to put simply, behavior is not traceable to childhood experiences, but rather based on one's present interest. So in its simplest sense, when we say autonomy, it is about a person's ability to act on his or her own values and interests. So it means that we have the freedom to act based on our interest in the present. Also, it is emphasized here the changing motives. So it means that whatever motives we had during our childhood, it is not the one that motivates our present behavior. Rather, it is the present motives or drives that is responsible on the way we act at the present. So technically speaking, our present motives are not related, or it cannot be associated with our past experiences because it is independent from our past experiences. That is why it is called functional autonomy. When we say functional autonomy or autonomous, it means that it is independent. Lahi gyud ang ato ang present motives sa ato ang past motives. And that ang magmatter diraan na case is dili ang past but ang present motives nato. So some examples of functional autonomy are the following. So cleaning your room, yard work, washing dishes, morning, evening, washing, toothbrushing routine, playing piano, academic learning. So you may have begun this to avoid negative consequences or to please others. But now, you might enjoy some of these activities. So for example, cleaning your room. So sa una bata pa ta, we clean our rooms, it's because mahadlok ta sa punishment sa ato ang parents. Makasab-an ta kung dili limpyo ato ang kwarto. So in that case, we are motivated to clean our room, it's because of the punishment. However, as you grow older, na-realize nimo na you find happiness from cleaning your room, and that kung limpyo imuhang kwarto is that ma-inspire ka. So, ang kanang motivation nimo nga manglimpyo sa imuhang kwarto, it's because malipay ka and that kanang ma-inspire ka. So, mao na ang imuhang present motives, and mao na siya ang mas responsible sa kung unsa ang imong behavior at the present. Dili kadtong past na experiences nimo about punishment. Also like playing piano. So, sa una, let's put it an example that sa una, ga play ka og piano, it's because gusto sa imuhang parents na hawd ka magplay. Sudbot pasabot na pugos lang gid ka na magplay og piano. But through the long run, nakita nimo ang imuhang passion, na unveil nimo ang imuhang interest sa pagplay og piano. So ang imuhang nakarong bag-o na motivation, imuhang present motivation in playing piano is not because tungod sa imuhang parents, but because you in yourself, you know that you are motivated or you find passion or you are interested in playing piano. So makita nato nga naagi kalahian or naay nahitabo nga changes from our motivation sa past o sa present, but ang mas magmatter dira is ang atuang motivation sa present. So functional autonomy is ALLPORT's reaction to theories of unchanging motives. Kaya diba ang kaning functional autonomy is all about theories of changing motives. So according to ALLPORT, Freud's pleasure principle and drive reduction hypothesis are more on historical facts rather than functional facts. So he quoted that people, it seems, are busy leading their lives into the future, whereas psychology, for the most part, is busy tracing them into the past. So mo na itong mabantayan sa mga ubang theories of personality na kung asa ilahang gina-explain ang behavior through past experiences sa individual. So Allport believed that to understand the present of an individual, looking too much into the past is not required. Dili kinahanglan na tan-awo nato ang past na experiences ana nga individual para i-explain nato ang iyahang present. Because in the concept of functional autonomy, motives for a certain behavior of a person at present are independent of their origins. So we have here the 4 requirements of an adequate theory of motivation. So actually, I have stated it earlier, but in this part, I am going to discuss it more further. So in here, the first requirement is that it will acknowledge the contemporaneity of motives. So again, it is all about the notion that present experiences or motivation are much important compared to our past drives, specifically during childhood, in a sense that our present motivation is functionally autonomy or functionally autonomous from our past experiences. The second requirement is that it will be a pluralistic theory, allowing for motives of many types. So in here, Allport highlighted that motivation cannot be reduced into a single theory, simply because we have different motivations. Like during childhood, our motivation is different from our motivation at the present. Also, the motivations of those people who are psychologically healthy are different from those motivations of people who are psychologically unhealthy. So in short, there is really differences and that we don't have the same ultimate motivation and that we can't reduce our motivation. And the third requirement is that it will ascribe dynamic force to cognitive processes. So for example, to planning and intention. So in here, Allport emphasizes that people are not only reactive, dili lang kay ga-reacta sa environment at that certain moment of time, but we are also motivated to maintain the tension. In short, we are proactive in which we are taking a move in our environment in association with our interests, with our dreams, with our plans, with our goals, with our intentions that are good and will lead us towards psychological health. So, mauna siya dari appropriate strivings. And the last requirement is that it will allow for the concrete uniqueness of motives. So in here, Allport's theory of personality emphasizes the uniqueness of the individual and the internal cognitive and motivational processes that influence one's behavior. So for example, ang atuang motivations sa intelligence, temperament, habits, skills, attitudes, and traits are unique and that is concrete, as well as our motivations for that particular aspect is functionally autonomous to what motivations we have during our past. So functional autonomy is any required system of motivation in which the tension or the tensions involved are not of the same kind as the antecedent tensions from which the acquired system developed. It is also contemporary and self-sustaining, and it grows out of an earlier motive but is functionally independent of it at all. So ang ato adong present motivations is gikan lang jud siya sa ato ang past motivations. However, it is functionally independent or functionally autonomous but pasabot lahi jud siya kung ato ang tan-awon kaysa sa ato ang past motivations. And there are two types of functional autonomy. These are the perseverative functional autonomy and the second one is the appropriate functional autonomy. So when we say perseverative functional autonomy, so this is termed from the word perseveration, that is the tendency of an impression to leave an influence on subsequent experience. It is also a system which continues primarily under its own power with little or no outside reinforcement. Also, it includes those repetitious activities of people. These feedback mechanisms in the person's nervous system and is ruled by simple neurological principles rather. So according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, perseveration is the continuation of something, such as a repetition of a word or either a repetition of an action, that is usually to an exceptional degree or beyond a desired point. So, this refers essentially to habits or behaviors that no longer serve their original purpose but still continues. So basically, kaning perseverative functional autonomy, mao ni siya ang kanang mga repetitive behaviors good or repetitive actions sa tao in which ang iyahang motivations ana nga behavior is lahi na sa kadtong iyahang original nga motivation or sa iyahang original na reason nganong iyahan ang gibuhat. So for example, you may have started smoking as a symbol of adolescent rebellion. But in the present, you smoke because you can't quit. So from that example, nakita na to nga isa lang ang behavior, smoking. Pero sa sugod, ang iyahang reason is that rebellion. Pero pag present na, pagka-present, ang iyahan ng reason is that dili na siya kaya muundang. So ang situation dira is nagpadayon ang behavior pero nalahi na ang iyahang nahimong motivation or reason nganong nagpadayon to nga behavior. For example, kadtong sa rat nga naa sa libro. Ang rat naga-run sa maze para mag-seek og food. Tapos after niya na-satisfy sa food, nagkapadayon gihapon siya dagan sa maze na nahumanan naman unta siya og pakaon or like nakita na siya og pagkaon. So in that example, nagpadayon ang behavior or like nagpadayon ang action sa rat na mudagan sa maze pero lahi na sa original niya nga motive ang iyahang present na motive. So examples of this perseverative functional autonomy are addictive behaviors such as smoking, as what we have stated earlier. Alcoholism, gainom. Rat running in a maze, na siya sa book, and also this uncompleted tasks na apod niya siya sa book. On the other hand, when we say appropriate functional autonomy, so these are the master system of motivation that explains unity in personality. So these are those self-sustaining motives in association with a proprium. So these are individuals' acquired interests, values, attitudes, and intentions, thus one striving for values and goals in the sense of responsibility. So it is something a bit more self-directed than habits because it imparts consistency to the individual for a congruent self-image and a higher level of maturity and growth. So in here, people developed goals, interests, values, attitudes, and the likes. So in short, appropriate functional autonomy is more self-directed, or it is much near to the core of our personality and are part of our proprium that also associates with improvement and progress in a sense that they acquire interest, they acquire goals, and that they are striving for psychological health. So an example of this is a woman who takes a job because she needs money. So at first, the work is uninteresting, perhaps even distasteful. So as the years pass, however, she develops a consuming passion for the job itself, spending some vacation time at work, and perhaps even developing a hobby that is closely related to her occupation. So from that example, nakita nato nga sa sugod wala siya giganahan, but nahatagan siya og chance para ma-develop ang passion niya sa work. So mao to nga and in that is there is a room for improvement and progress. Also, the idea of this type of functional autonomy, which is the appropriate functional autonomy, specifically in terms of values nga pwede na makuha nato diri ang autonomy or functional autonomy, lead ALLPORT and his associates Vernon and Lindsay to develop a categorization of values, and it is stated in their book called A Study of Values. Criterion of functional autonomy. So a present motive is functionally autonomous to the extent that it seeks new goals. So in other terms, it maintains tensions. Hence, behaviors will continue even after the motivation behind those behaviors change. Again, certain behaviors will continue even if our motivation is changed and the present motivation makes room for progress and improvement. So we have here the 8 processes that are not functionally autonomous, and basically biological drives is not considered as functionally autonomous because we do this, although these are repetitive behaviors, but we do this for survival purposes. The same with reflex actions. And also, neurotic or pathological symptoms are not considered as functionally autonomous, especially those that can be treated or that can be solved by undergoing therapy or by counseling. So we are now going to tackle the study of the individual. So basically, Allport's theory will not be called a psychology of the individual if he did not make some methods to study the individual. So in morphogenic science, Allport distinguished 2 approaches. So these are the nomothetic and the idiographic. So when we say nomothetic, it studies and analyzes a group of individuals. So it seeks to establish universal laws of human functioning to understand the behavior and experiences of people in general. So the nomothetic view emphasizes comparability among individuals. So this viewpoint sees traits as having the same psychological meaning in everyone. Whereas when we say idiographic approach or idiographic method, it focuses more on the individual, or it simply means that it is an intensive study of a simple case. So its primary goal is to understand the functioning of a specific individual. And because with the fact that idiographic is often misused or misunderstood, so Allport used the morphogenic procedures. So when we say morphogenic procedures, this is all about the study of patterns or structures of particular traits present in a person, allowing for comparability among individuals. Also, Allport called his study of the individual a morphogenic science. It because it uses methods that gather data on a single individual. Because as we all know, Allport focuses on the uniqueness of the individual. So he uses this morphogenic science, or what's so-called the idiographic approach. So Allport's accepted self-reports, and examples of this are the diaries of Marion Taylor and the letters from Jenny. So these diaries are what Gordon Allport and Ada Allport, his wife, received from a woman called Marion Taylor. And their work with Marion Taylor probably helped them organize and publish a second case. That is the story of Jenny Gove Masterson, which is another pseudonym, specifically the letters from Jenny. So if you have read about letters from Jenny, so these letters reveal the story of an older woman and her intense love and hate feelings toward her son Ross. So 2 of Allport's students, Alfred Baldwin and Geoffrey Paige, used a personal structure analysis and factor analysis, as well as Gordon Allport used the common sense approach to discern Jenny's personality. And they yielded similar results, showing that Jenny is aggressive, possessive towards her son, independent, autonomous, and also dramatic or intense. So these 2, specifically the diaries of Marion Taylor and letters from Jenny, are best illustrating the morphogenic science in the study of an individual by Gordon Allport. For related researches of Allport, he has 2 studies. The first one is the intrinsic versus extrinsic religious orientation. So Allport believed that a deep religious commitment was a mark of a mature person. But he also saw that many regular churchgoers are involved in deep racial and social prejudice. When we say prejudice, it's all about discrimination or biased judgment. So because of this, Allport used the religious orientation scale to assess the 2 types of religious orientation. And these types of religious orientation are the intrinsic religious orientation and extrinsic religious orientation. When we say intrinsic religious orientation, these are the motivation arises from goals set forth by the religious tradition itself. In short, in here, it uses religion regardless of social or like any other external pressures, and that they find their master motive in there. Whereas when we say extrinsic religious orientation, it is a utilitarian motivation underlying religious behaviors. So in here, individual endorses religious beliefs and even engages in religious acts only to the extent that they might aid in achieving mundane goals such as feeling protected and will be able to acquire approval. So in short, in this part, no, in this type of religious orientation, it is the use of religion to gain social acceptance or reward. So obviously, in the religious orientation and psychological health research by Hood, Hansen, Vandenberg, Patterson, Kosek, and Maltby, they found that intrinsic religious orientation is much better compared to extrinsic. It's because those that have intrinsic religious orientation are considered to psychologically healthy, while extrinsic religious orientation is a sign of unhealthy psychological aspect. To summarize, Allport also emphasized the religious motivation in mental health and the religious motivation in physical health. So, religious motivation, in short, is important in the health aspect of an individual, but they must be religious, people must be religious for the right reason, and not just to please others or to get acceptance. So the second one is how to reduce prejudice, which is optimal contact. So this research is like a continuation of the intrinsic versus extrinsic religious orientation, because in here, Allport tried to reduce prejudice. So he postulated the contact hypothesis. Now what is this contact hypothesis? So this is the interactions of majority and minority groups that is under provisions of optimal conditions in order to reduce prejudice. Now what are these optimal conditions? So we have here 4 optimal conditions. The first one is that equal status between 2 groups. The second is that common goals. Third is cooperation between groups. And fourth is the support of an authority figure, law, or custom. So for an example, it is stated in the book, so if African American and European American neighbors got together to form a neighborhood watch group with the common goal of making their neighborhood safer, and such a program was endorsed by the mayor or city police department, then this interaction and group effort would be likely to lead to reduce prejudice among residents of the neighborhood. So as we all know, prejudice is all about biased judgment or being biased or like having or showing dislikes or distrust. It's all about discrimination. So in this example, if we are going to make African American and European American people neighbors, and that they are responsible in making their neighborhood safer, then they would likely to have, or they would likely to reduce the prejudice. It's because the two of them have the same goals, or like they have the same effort exerted to make their neighborhood safer, because that is also the program endorsed by the mayor or city police department, and that they are obliged to do it. So sa ingon ani nga case, instead na mangibabaw ang prejudice, mas mag-exert sila og effort para ma-achieve nila ang ilahang common goal, which is to make their neighborhood safer. So in short, ma-reduce good ang prejudice. And even though its prime objective is only to reduce prejudice, no, the optimal contact is only to reduce prejudice, focusing on the racial aspect, it also find out that optimal conditions was also able to reduce prejudice attitudes towards mentally ill people and to others as well. For the critic of Allport, Allport's views were based more on philosophical speculation and common sense than on scientific studies. Additionally, he has eclectic approach in building his theory. As a consequence, his theory is quite narrow, being limited mostly to a model of human motivation. And also, as you can observe no, on the majority of psychology of the individual, it is more on motivation. Thus, it rates low on its ability to organize psychological data and to submit itself to falsification. Furthermore, it also rates moderate in terms of generated research and guide for the practitioner. Moreover, it rates high on parsimony and internal consistency. For Allport's concept of humanity, so he saw people as active, purposeful, flexible, and unique, where our behaviors, traits, and fates were motivated mainly by, again, present choices that we are aware of. Thus, we are beings who are conscious of what we are doing and why we are doing such thing. He also has moderate view in terms of free choice. He got high rates for teleology and optimism, and he also has put moderate emphasis in the aspect of social influences. Accordingly, early childhood experiences are less important compared to the environmental experiences in the present. Also means that an individual's current self-image is far more important than whatever he or she has been in the past. Also, Allport emphasizes the uniqueness of the individual. For our recapitulation, personality is the dynamic organization within the individual of those psychophysical systems that determine a person's behavior and thought. He also emphasized the proactive position, which indicates that we have conscious control of our lives. We have two traits which are the common and individual traits. We also have three levels of personal dispositions, which are the cardinal, central, and secondary dispositions. Motivational dispositions are personal dispositions that initiate actions, whereas stylistic dispositions are personal dispositions that guide actions. Proprium are behaviors and personal dispositions that are warm and central to our lives and that we regard as peculiarly our own. A sufficient theory of motivation must explain both reactive and proactive behaviors. Functional autonomy refers to motives that are self-sustaining and independent from the motives that were originally responsible for a behavior. And we have two functional autonomy, which are the perseverative and appropriate functional autonomy. And for the last, morphogenic procedures is used to determine patterns of behavior within a single individual. And that would be all for Allport's Psychology of the Individual. Thank you for listening and God bless.